Living the law of love. The greatest unifying force is the magnetism of spiritual love. The centrality of love as the foundational law in both the Old and New Testament, how love for God and love for neighbor are interconnected and should guide our actions. My understanding of love of God and love of neighbor can be seen in the crucifix. God loved us. We see the vertical aspect of the cross. God so loved the world, sent His only Son. And we see the horizontal aspect of the crucifix. By stretching His hand, He said, "It's accomplished." He breathed His Spirit to tell the world how much He loved. He extended His hand to tell the humanity to love one another. It's both love of God and love of neighbor are the two sides of the coin, a railroad. If the railroad is disrupted, it will be a disaster for the carriage, for the train to derail. Our life will derail if we are on the track that is broken. You cannot have one side of a coin, two sides of a coin for a coin to exist. Living the law of love consists in loving God and loving our neighbor. The call to live out the law of love from this Sunday's reading, Exodus chapter 20 to 26, and 1 Thessalonians 1, 5 to 10, and Matthew chapter 22, 34 to 40. When we look the first reading from Exodus chapter 22 to 26, we see how God reveals deep concern for the vulnerable. The first reading, the second reading from Thessalonians chapter 1, 5 to 10 speaks of faith, love, hope in action. Faith, love become source of inspiration to others. The parishioners have to consider their own faith, love can be powerful testimony to the world around them. In the Gospel passage of Matthew chapter 22, 34 to 40, the Pharisees question and Jesus responds. At the core of Jesus' teaching are the two great commandments to love God and love our neighbor. Connected to the teachings of the previous readings, highlighting the unity of love as both a moral and theological virtue. Like the last Sunday we had the reading from whether to pay Caesar or not, to pay taxes or not. Today, again, a passage of dichotomy where talks about which is the greatest commandment. Loving God, loving neighbor surpasses the law and the prophets. God's compassion and love in Exodus reminds us of a compassionate God. Among the many commandments of Jewish law, the commands to take care of the poor, the stranger, and the widow and orphan is constantly mentioned in the Old Testament for a good reason. These people had no one to care for them, often resorted to begging to survive. The prophets reminded the Israelites for disobeying the law. It's often because they have not seen to the needs of the widow and orphan or the strangers in the land. In Exodus, we hear God's warning not to hurt or oppress any of the marginalized people. The reason is simple. The Lord is a compassionate God who will right any wrong done to those who are His own. And He reminds the Israelites that they were once strangers in Egypt and poor. They had been the ones begging and would now be able to give to others. In the gospel, the greatest commandment, love, Pharisees and Sadducees test Jesus and poses a question. These teachers and scholars of the law may have been arguing among themselves about the greatest commandment of the Torah. They wanted Jesus to pick a side or see if his answer was entirely orthodox or conservative. Jesus will not take the bait, instead giving them two commandments, both of which are in the law, with which neither group can argue. The first commandment is called the Great Shema. It's taken from Deuteronomy chapter 6, 4-5. You shall love the Lord with your God with all your heart. Matthew's version substitutes mind for strength in the original, but the commandment was widely recognized as the greatest one. But Jesus offers a second like the first. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. This can be found in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, as part of the Great Holiness Code. You shall be holy as I, the Lord, am holy. Leviticus connects it with the last 7 of the 10 commandments and includes taking care of the widow and the orphan and all the others. Jesus was right to lift up and link the two commandments as the model on which all the others are built. Basically, these two commandments, the love of God from Deuteronomy chapter 6, 4-5, and love of neighbor, Leviticus chapter 19, verses 18, comes from the Old Testament, but Jesus gives a twist. He says, living the law of love, a challenge and a gift from God. Dave Wills in Happy Wives Club writes the 7 laws of love. Love requires commitment. Love speaks truth. Love repels fear. Love offers grace. Love gives selflessly. Love powerfully protects. Love lives forever. The central theme of love is seen in all the 3 readings, Exodus, Thessalonians, and Matthew. The parishioners should make love the foundation of the faith, living out God's compassion and love to those around them, asking God's grace to help us embrace the law of love, and offering gratitude for the gift of faith, love, and hope that unites us as a community. Living the law of love. The greatest unifying force is the magnetism of spiritual love.